Anthony Rumble Johnson is perhaps the scariest MMA fighter to have ever lived. He's the type of talent that, at his best, many of his peers looked the other way and prayed they didn't get a call up to fight him. From his days at 170 pounds, where he was an absolutely massive welterweight, to his performances in his natural division of 205 pounds, Rumble had a very entertaining and very impressive career. But before I go any further, if you're watching this, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more resume reviews. I'll have a bunch more coming in the following days. Alright, now on with the video. A product of West Lawrence High School in Georgia, Johnson attended Lassen College in Susanville, California on a wrestling scholarship, becoming an NJCAA or Junior College National Champion. Rumble began training MMA at age 20, having his first fight at PF2 on August 16, 2006 at age 22, where he defeated 1-0 Jonathan Romero via TKO 69 seconds into round 1. This was followed up by a unanimous decision victory over 9-3 Rich Moskowitz on September 16, 2006 at the Rocky Mountain Nationals, where he'd win his finals bout just a couple hours later against 5-2 Keith Wilson via majority decision. After winning his Rocky Mountain Nationals tournament and climbing to 3-0 in exactly 1 month's time, Rumble made his UFC debut less than a year following his pro debut in June of 2007 against the 13-2 Chad Rayner, who he KO'd in just 13 seconds. Rumble would miss weight for the first time in his four-fight career next, weighing in at 177 pounds, where he faced 28-12 veteran Rich Clemente later that year in September at UFC 76. After securing a knockdown in the early goings of the contest and then a takedown in round 2, Johnson was all scrambled by Clemente, where he got his back taken and was submitted with a rear naked choke at 3:05 of the second round. Rumble returned to the octagon about 6 months later to face 11-2 Tough 6 finalist Tommy Spear next in April of 2008, picking up another violent KO victory just 51 seconds into the fight. Johnson would next partake in 2 bouts opposing 7-1 Kevin Burns in July of 2008 and again later that year in December. After winning most of their first fight, Rumble was poked in the eye, the fight being stopped at 3:35 with Burns the victor via TKO. And if you've seen this fight, all you can probably think is, man, aren't we glad Steve Mazzagatti isn't around anymore. Rumble righted that wrong in their immediate rematch, however, KOing Burns with a head kick 28 seconds into round 3. Both of these fights were competitive on the feet, with Johnson largely out-wrestling Burns in each. Following victory over Burns in their rematch, Johnson then faced 14-4 Luigi Forivani in February of 2009, winning the fight via TKO at 4:39 of round 1. Next came another quick knockout, this one coming in October of 2009 against 11-3 Yoshiyuki Yoshida, who he stopped in just 41 seconds. Johnson would, however, miss weight for this contest as well, coming in at 176 pounds, 5 pounds over the welterweight non-title fight limit. Johnson's next test came against 15-4 Josh Koscheck, and this turned into a really great fight. Each man had success on the feet, each of them eating one another's best shots, though Johnson would get taken down once each in the first and second rounds. Koscheck's takedown in round 2 ultimately saw him take Rumble's back and submit him at 4:47 of the round, bringing Johnson's record to 8-3. There's no shame in this defeat, though. Josh Koscheck was the number 2 welterweight in the world for years there, much like Colby Covington had been over the last several years. Rumble returned to the octagon a year and a half later in March of 2011 to face 23-8 former title challenger Dan Hardy, who he absolutely mauled to a universal 30-27 unanimous decision victory, a sizable upset at the time. This was followed up by a head kick KO win in October of 2011 over 14-2 Charlie Brenneman, stopping him at 2:49 of the opening round. Rumble decided the cut to 170 pounds was becoming too much for his body and opted for a move up to 185, where he fought former UFC light heavyweight champion and UFC heavyweight tournament winner Vitor Belfort in January of 2012 at UFC 142, who came in with a record of 20-9. Belfort had gone 6-1 over his last 7 going into this fight, 5 of those wins coming by knockout, and the only defeat coming in his title fight with Anderson Silva. However, Rumble would also miss weight for this contest, coming in at 197 pounds, 11 pounds over the middleweight non-title fight limit. Johnson came out with a furious pace in this fight, securing 2 takedowns early, though Dan Miragliotta stood them up quickly each time, which may have led to Rumble's demise in this fight. Belfort eventually started stuffing his takedown attempts, ultimately taking his back and submitting him with a rear naked choke at 4:49 of round 1. After losing to Belfort, Johnson was cut from the promotion, where he was originally slated for a middleweight bout with David Branch in May of 2012, a fight both fighters missed weight for, the commission ultimately settling on 195-pound catchweight. Johnson defeated Branch via unanimous decision at Titan FC 22. Johnson then made the move to 205 pounds, where he had a wealth of success, picking up wins over 8-3 Estevez Jones, 12-4 Jake Rochelle, and 14-3 DJ Linderman, bringing him to 4-1 across 5 fights in 2012. Johnson then made his heavyweight debut against former UFC heavyweight champion Andrei Arlovski in March of 2013, battering him for 3 rounds in a fight he broke Arlovski's jaw in, ultimately being awarded the unanimous decision victory. Rumble dropped back down to light heavyweight for his next bout, remaining there for the remainder of his career. Rumble KO'd 20-10 veteran Mike Kyle in this bout that went down in January of 2014 before returning to the UFC, where he'd gone 6-0 since his pink slip 2 years earlier. He returned to the octagon in April of 2014 at UFC 172, where he absolutely battered top 5 contender Phil Davis for 3 rounds en route to a unanimous decision win, handily winning all 3 rounds in what turned into quite a shocking beatdown. Nearly everyone expected the former D1 national champion to quite easily maul Johnson, and maybe even submit him. But he didn't. He didn't even secure a single takedown out of 8 attempts, and really he just looked lost that whole fight once he felt Rumble's power. After a dominant win in his return bout, Johnson would then face an absolute legend in Antonio Rogerio Nogueira in July of 2014, who came into the bout with a record of 21-5 and was coming off back-to-back wins over former UFC light heavyweight champions Tito Ortiz and Rashad Evans. This also turned into quite a beatdown, though it didn't last long, as Rumble KO'd Lil Nog in a mere 44 seconds with perhaps the most lethal series of uppercuts you'll ever see. Johnson next faced former title challenger Alexander Gustafsson in January of 2015, a man many saw as the uncrowned champion of the division, who'd since rebounded from his disputed decision defeat to then-champion Jon Jones with a knockout win over Jimmy Manuwa. Rumble beat the living hell out of Gustafsson in this fight, in Gustafsson's hometown of Stockholm, Sweden no less, winning the fight via TKO at 2:15 of round 1. By this point, Johnson had gone 3-0 since returning to the UFC with 3 dominant wins, 2 of which came over top 5, maybe even top 3 contenders in what were huge upsets at the time. This led to Johnson's first UFC title shot, where he was originally slated to face Jon Jones for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship in May of 2015 at UFC 187. However, Jones was in the middle of his multiple suspensions and stripped of his title in the lead up to this fight. In Jon Jones's absence, Rumble fought 15-1 Daniel Cormier for the vacant title at that same event, where he nearly won the title in a mere few seconds with an early knockdown. However, Cormier didn't go out, regained his composure throughout the round, and ultimately began to wear on Rumble, taking him down a total of 3 times en route to his rear naked choke submission at 2:39 of round 3. Rumble got right back to it with 3 straight knockout victories, defeating 15-1 Jimmy Manuwa via KO at 28 seconds of round 2 in September of 2015, 20-4 Ryan Bader via KO at 1:26 of round 1 in January of 2016, and 25-4 Glover Teixeira via KO in just 13 seconds in August of 2016. Johnson was looking dangerous as ever again, which led to his second title shot in his rematch with Daniel Cormier in April of 2017 at UFC 210, who had since climbed to 18-1 as a professional himself. Rumble used a wrestling-heavy attack in this fight, which frustrated his corner as well as many fans, though he did secure a takedown on DC, and even did in their first fight as well. It was a bad game plan against the 2-time Olympian, and he was ultimately submitted with a rear naked choke once again, this time at 3:37 of round 2. Johnson then retired from the sport, not competing in a cage for nearly 4 years before it was announced that he would enter Bellator's light heavyweight Grand Prix in early 2021. Rumble made his debut at Bellator 258 in May of 2021, KOing 7-2 Jose Augusto at 1:30 of round 2, where he made it past the quarterfinals of the tournament. Vadim Nemkov is expected to be Rumble's next fight in the semifinals, who was the Bellator light heavyweight champion going in, and who he's expected to face in October of 2021 at Bellator 268. However, in September of this year, Johnson was forced from the bout and the tournament due to an undisclosed illness, and he would never fight again. Roughly 14 months after hearing the news of him withdrawing from the tournament, on November 13th, 2022, Anthony Johnson died at the age of 38 courtesy of organ failure, a result of his battle with cancer. This saddened the hearts of MMA fans across the globe. Rumble had always, especially in recent memories, been a beloved fighter that everyone loved to watch and root for. It's really too bad. He died so young and his career was cut short. Who knows how his future Grand Prix performances would have gone. He was also titled the head of fighter relations for BKFC in his later years. Things were looking up for him once again. He was staying around the sport and doing well for himself. But in life, unfortunately, these things happen. Over the course of his 29-fight MMA career, Johnson left the sport with a record of 23-6, 17 of those wins coming via knockout with 6 decisions, and all 5 of his actual losses coming via submission, more specifically all 5 of them being rear naked chokes, as his second loss wasn't really a loss. He never lost a stand-up fight, and honestly he was thrown to the wolves right out of the gate. even though he wasn't fighting the very best in the sport right out of the gate. He fought a 9-3 opponent when he was just 1-0, a 5-2 when he was just 2-0, a 13-2 when he was 4-0, a 40-fight veteran in his fifth ever fight, 11-2 when he was 5-1, 14-4 when he was 6-2, 23-8 when he was 8-3, 14-2 when he was 9-3, and so on. A lot of people remember Johnson's weight misses, but you may be surprised to know that he had 10 welterweight fights in the UFC and made weight for 8 of them. No, the 2 times he missed the mark were severe misses, but he shockingly made the 171-pound limit 8 different times. After a failed 2-fight middleweight run, he moved up to light heavyweight, where he became one of the scariest men to ever walk this earth. He was literally like the 205-pound version of Francis Ngannou. We have his losses. He lost to a 40-fight veteran that went on to win his next 4 straight inside the UFC when he was just 4-0. We all know by now he didn't lose to Kevin Burns, and even so, avenged that so-called defeat in devastating fashion. He lost to Josh Koscheck, again, a top 3 guy for years at this point. Fedor Belfort, one of the most dangerous fighters to ever walk the earth, and Daniel Cormier twice. That's not such a bad resume. It's quite respectable, really, especially when you consider the names he beat. So let's take a closer look at some of the names Rumble beat during his career. When Johnson beat David Branch, Branch went on to win his next 11 straight fights, laying claim to the World Series of Fighting middleweight and light heavyweight titles, and didn't lose again for over 5 more years. The person that finally ended that streak was former Strikeforce and UFC middleweight champion Luke Rockhold, who Branch nearly stopped in the opening round. Jake Roshaw was a 3-time D1 national champion at Oklahoma State with a respectable career of his own. There's a former UFC heavyweight champion in there. Then we have his light heavyweight run. Phil Davis remained atop the UFC's light heavyweight division until his departure from the promotion in 2015, where he went on to become Bellator's light heavyweight champion following defeat to Johnson. Davis has gone 12-5 since their 2014 encounter, 4 of those defeats coming in razor-thin split decisions, 2 of which were title fights. Rumble absolutely ran right through Alexander Gustafsson in what was supposed to be Gus's homecoming. And again, after Gustafsson's performance against John Jones, many looked at him as the uncrowned light heavyweight champion of the world, and Rumble just made it look easy. Jimmy Manuwa was 15-1 going into their fight with 13 knockouts, and went on to KO Ovince St. Preux and Corey Anderson in back-to-back fights immediately following defeat to him. Ryan Bader went on to become Bellator's 2-division champion, having won and defended both their heavyweight and light heavyweight titles on multiple occasions, going 11-2 since his loss to Johnson, where he still holds Bellator's heavyweight title. And Glover Teixeira went on to become UFC light heavyweight champion following his 13-second KO defeat to Rumble. I mean, come on, that's just incredible. Bruising up Phil Davis for 3 rounds, stopping Alexander Gustafsson in 2 minutes, someone many believe is the greatest fighter ever to have never won a belt. KOing Bader in even less time. The way he stuffed Bader's takedown, took his back and KO'd him from back mount was just effortless and flawless. And then the way he knocked out Glover Teixeira hadn't happened previous, and it hasn't happened since. Glover retired last year with a record of 33-9, and Anthony Johnson is the only man to ever stop him in the first round. Furthermore, Phil Davis was ranked at number 4 at the time Johnson beat him. Alexander Gustafsson was ranked at number 1. Ryan Bader was ranked at number 4, and Glover Teixeira was ranked at number 2. After a 7-3 stint in the UFC from 2007 to 2012, Rumble went 6-2 upon returning to the promotion from 2014 to 2017, going 13-2 across his final 15 bouts as a professional, only losing to Daniel Cormier. It's too bad we never got to see Rumble versus John Jones. That's a great fight we needed for MMA history, much like Khabib versus Tony, Jones versus Ngannou, or GSP versus Silva. But like those 3, it unfortunately didn't happen, and as a result of Jones's suspension. Could he have been the man to do it? Would Anthony Rumble Johnson have been the one to stop John Jones's long reign? We can speculate, but we'll never know. If you made it this far, I would like to thank you for watching my video. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you liked it. I'll be back with another soon.